Morning or afternoon, I'm the Mainly Digger, and I hope you're having a good time. I hope you're surviving this pandemic. This video is about murderers from Maine, or Maine murders, however you want to put it. I was a correctional officer for 2 years. None of these individuals were in jail, in my jail at the time that I was a correctional officer. But they all had, as a correctional officer, I always heard stories about these individuals. Like I said, I never had to deal with any of them as inmates. But a lot of these inmates had underlying mental issues that weren't diagnosed or weren't taken care of appropriately. They were, a lot of them, like, it's pretty much the same story over and over again, is they have a mental breakdown, or they find out their diagnosis, or they're having issues, they go to seek help, or they get in trouble and get sent to an institution, and there's no more, they lose federal funding, or they lose funding for the institution, and they kick them to the street, and like, oh, okay, go take your medication at home, which they don't do, and it progresses to something worse. And there's inmates, there's murderers who are just murderers, they're just bad people. Regardless of what their mental state is, there's something wrong with them that makes them want to kill. But you can go on forever you can argue back and forth forever with different people about mental illness and killing or murderers, and back and forth, sociopaths, psychopaths. To me, it's interesting. It just got really creepy. Because I'm from Maine. They're not, all the books I've read, like when I was younger, about serial killers and stuff, it was all in another state. It was New York or California or middle of nowhere, Midwest or something. But like all these individuals, all these murderers, all these convicted murderers, they were all murdered in places where I've walked or lived or witnessed. Like there's one spot where I won't tell you where, like I used to go there all the time, hiking or hunting or fishing. I used to walk past that spot all the time, and I can't go there anymore because it makes me think of what happened here, this and that, whatever. Anyway. I have 3 stories before the felons or convicted murderers. There's 3 Reddit stories that I read that kind of pushed me down this avenue of research and stuff like that. I'm telling you, I had a hard time researching this one. All right, Mainly Dig Out. Hopefully you enjoy my video. Please watch or subscribe. This is a list of Maine's unsolved murders. Here is the second part of the list. This is a list compiled from the Maine State Police Department. Here are some stories from Reddit about possible encounters with serial killers. They may just be stories, or they may be true, but still creepy. I can see this one happening, but like a Mainer being like, hey, yeah, you can stay at my house. It's happened to my father and I before, where someone just offers a room for the night. You go hunting or you go fishing, and you give them a couple $, and they let you have a room. But I asked my dad about this one time, and what if something happens? And he's like, well, they better have a bulletproof vest on, because we're prepared. Our first person on this list is Mark Bouchard. In 1996, Mark Bouchard walked into this Waterville church or chapel, it's actually a covenant, and murdered 2 nuns with a religious object and a knife. He beat many more, but caused the death of 2. Bouchard had a history of mental health. He was manic depressive and had been off his meds for an extended period of time, allowed to be alone and unchecked in his apartment. Before this incident, before he was a nun-killing murderer, he played the trumpet professionally. He was one of few individuals that played in a jazz band professionally played the trumpet. So it's the state's fault. So prior to the murders, Mark Bouchard had been arrested and sent to the state mental institution. But due to cutbacks, he was re-released into society and allowed to go unchecked. So because of financial issues and money, and the state couldn't hold him. Bouchard died in state custody. Dawn Rosignol of Midway, Maine, was murdered around Colby College. She was a Colby College student. Years later, a Utah parolee, Edward Hackett, would admit killing Dawn and give details to the murder that no one else would know. It's reported that Edward Hackett picked up the Colby College student at her dorm. Abducted, did some horrible stuff, beat her to death, and then dropped her off at this point near the railroad track. Hackett was on parole for a robbery charge and kidnapping charge in Utah, and had been released from another mental health institute in Utah prior to committing this crime. So in 1982, this guy killed an 11-year-old boy in Portland, Maine, then traveled to Nebraska, I think killing 2 more boys. He was sentenced to death and died at 33. David Silva, he's from Carver, Maine, and he killed a man from Carver. Silva also spent time in California at San Quentin. When I was a correctional officer, I had never had contact with this inmate. I got there after he left and went to the state prison in Maine. But I still heard stories about this, how manipulative he was, how he pretty much ran the inmates inside Kennebec County. Kennebec County is not very big. It's kind of small. 200 or 230 inmates at max, but he had control of all of that in some way. Albert Flick killed his wife in the 70s, and in 2007 was released. The judge released him thinking that because of his age, which I think he was around 70, that his violent tendencies would stop. Within a year, he killed again and was back in prison. In 1993, Stephen Downs sexually assaulted, shot and stabbed a female in Fairbanks, Alaska, in her dormitory. 26 years later, Stephen Downs was arrested in Auburn. He was a nurse in Auburn. Using DNA evidence found on the body, the Alaskan authorities finally found out it was Stephen. By making this video, I just wanted to, I wanted to show that, and I didn't really show it, and what I'm trying to explain now is that even decades after these horrible traumatic events, these events still affect people. They're still affecting the correctional facility that I worked at. They're still affecting the people that were involved, the family members on both sides. And that's, as a correctional officer, that's what I got to see both sides of the families that out. You get to see the effects, and it's an odd thing. And I think that's why making this video affected me so much, because I know the emotion that goes behind, or what's going on behind closed doors. I know what they're thinking. I've seen how this affects people, and it was really hard for me to make. It took me 3 days. Usually a video maybe at max takes me a day to do, but this took me 3 days to put everything together. All right, hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you're surviving. Keep surviving, mainly dig out.